Welcome to Revenue Rehab, your one-stop destination for collective solutions to the biggest challenges faced by marketing leaders today. Now head on over to the couch, make yourself comfortable, and get ready to change the way you approach revenue. Leading your recovery is modern marketer, author, speaker, and chief operating officer at Tegrita, Brandi Starr.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Revenue Rehab. I am your host, Brandi Starr, and we have another amazing episode for you today. I am joined by Jeff Winters. While at a previous sales position, Sapper founder Jeff Winters implemented a unique email strategy that consistently landed him in Fortune 100 boardrooms. But every time he finished his pitch, these companies would grill him on his strategy. Great product, but how the heck did you get this meeting? In 2013, after hearing this a dozen too many times, he started Sapper Consulting. Since then, Jeff has led the business to become one of the fastest growing companies in St. Louis and has most recently been featured in the St. Louis Business Journal's list of 40 under 40. He is a candid, thoughtful, and dynamic leader. Once Sapper was acquired by Abstrakt Marketing Group in 2021, Jeff took over as Chief Revenue Officer, leading the sales and sales enablement teams tasked with getting the company to reach their 70 million yearly sales goal. Jeff, welcome to Revenue Rehab. Your session begins now.
Brandi, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Excited to chat with you.
Yes, I'm excited to have you here. Your background is really impressive, and we'll get into that in just a bit. But before we do, I like to break the ice with a little woo-saw moment that I call Buzzword Banishment. So tell me, what buzzword would you like to get rid of forever?
Total woo-saw moment. I would like to get rid of the buzzword value add. It might be two words, maybe a hyphen. Value add.
I can take a phrase.
Right,
so why do you want to get rid of that one?
I think because in almost all cases, when people say value add, it is not value add to the customer. Like for example, okay, here's one I like. As a value add, we're gonna do an audit of your Amazon traffic, and we're gonna give that to you so that you can have it. But really, that's not a value add. That's a tool to sell somebody something that is selfish, like on your part. Or as a value add, we're going to give you X along with our product, but like that thing doesn't cost anything and it would have come with the product anyways. And so I, by and large, think when people say value add, it is code for something that helps us or is cheap enough that looks like it could be of value, but actually isn't. So we can give it away for free. So that's what I want to banish: the phrase, the compound word, or the word value add.
I will take it. I do agree that there are so many things that get sort of thrown in as the value add that I definitely would agree are not really valuable to the end customer, or is something that it's like, that would have been in there anyway.
Right. Has anybody said value add before? Am I unique? I really want
No, that one
unique.
is unique. We
Yes.
do get some that, come up over and over and over. And back in March, we had our March Madness for Buzzword Banishment, and bruh ended up being the word that was like officially banished across. So not a marketing word, but definitely one that I'm happy to get rid of.
All right. Okay. All right. Good. Well, I didn't want to be somebody saying the same thing everybody else. Like, synergy. I bet 9,000 people said synergy. Love them all.
I think the most common one is attribution. Like that is the one that I think has been banished probably 10 times in, all 100+ episodes. So value add is a new one, and we'll see how it does next year in March Madness to see if people agree at how bad that one is.
Okay. Well, I think it's going to age well. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it performs.
Awesome. So now that we've gotten that off our chest, tell me, what brings you to Revenue Rehab today?
Oh, just excited for any opportunity to chat with the revenue leaders of the world. I think that we all need to talk as much as possible all the time, but definitely now. Things to the extent that I can lend any value or insights to people that are going through what we're all going through and fighting the same struggles, like that's a great opportunity for me. So I'm so excited. And you got such a tremendous audience and following that it's amazing to be able to connect with that group.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I know we're going to jump in and tackle the problem around leveraging email for sales and how you've been successful at using email to get the meeting in a way that's been so impressive. And so before we actually jump into that topic, I believe in setting intentions. It gives us focus, it gives us purpose, and most important, it gives our audience an understanding of what they should expect from our discussion. And so, related to the success that you've had with email, what would you like people to take away from our discussion?
Okay, so my intention doesn't have to do with the content as much as it has to do with I hope that people think I'm like provocative. That's what I want. That is my intention. It's very selfish. It's got a tinge of narcissism to it, but like I feel like if I can be provocative and interesting, then people will listen to my nerdy email takeaways. Because I got to tell you, I hate to spoil her, but they're really helpful, but they're a little in the weeds, and I don't want to bore anybody. So I'm going to try to be provocative with my technical, boring takeaways. Is that good?
Yes, I will take it. And I like a little provocativeness. And, it is one of those things that I'm glad you said what you said in terms of it being in the weeds, because that is one challenge sometimes where revenue leaders don't necessarily think about email. They don't, put a lot of emphasis on it because it is a tactic. It is very in the weeds. But one of the things that we believe is that it is such it is like the primary way that we communicate with each other. And so getting that right ties to so many of those other things that are not in the weeds. And so, as leaders, sometimes we got to dip down. We can't spend all our time in the weeds, but sometimes we got to dip down and really understand some of those fundamentals. And email for sales is one of those things that I see so many people getting wrong. And so would love to let's start with tell us your story and how you have been able to leverage email effectively to actually drive meetings and drive revenue.
Yeah, so I'm going to give you the origin story. You alluded to it in the intro, and I'll truncate it, and then I'll get to where we are today because I think it's valuable. So I was hired at this startup to be the chief revenue officer at like 26 years old. And I had as much business being the chief revenue officer of this company as like no one. Like there was no reason. I was underexperienced. I had in the industry. My most recent job was like a sales manager. Like there's no reason for this guy to hire me at this job. And I got there on the first day, and he's kind of like, "Hey, the product doesn't exactly work, and we haven't really sold it to anybody. And the only people you can sell it to are these chief human resources officers at Fortune 500 companies. Go." And I very quickly realized why I was hired with having no business or resume or experience or credentials to be hired is because like nobody else would take that job. It's impossible. So I failed miserably for 6 months. I'm dusting my resume off, and finally I start waking up at 3 a.m, writing funny emails and getting tons of meetings, like 180 meetings in a year. And I end up in boardrooms all over the country. And the one that comes to mind most vividly was Morgan Stanley. I get up there, there's 6 people in this room, and none of them wanted to talk about the software. They just wanted to talk about my email and how I had written this email at 3 a.m. What was I doing? And so I'm flying home like, okay, well, maybe I could do this for other people. So that wasn't as smart as a lot of these entrepreneurs out there who are like, I see a problem and I'm going to solve this problem. I just knew I was good at very few things, and this happened to be one of them, and I was just going to kind of run with it. And I was going to school at night, and I was like, if this thing fails, forget it. I'll go back and do this full time. So started a business basically sending emails to get sales meetings, and it worked. We got lots and lots of customers, but over time, I just want to talk briefly about, and we can go deeper if we want to, the evolution of email for sales prospecting. Because in 2013, 2014, 2015, It was basically easy. I mean, if you had the right technology defined as these sales engagement tools, things like Outreach or SalesLoft or things that we're all pretty familiar with, you were just way ahead of the game, and you could send emails, and it was all about the subject line and the content. Okay, great. And it was great. You get sales meetings all day. And then as those tools proliferated the market, you got a response from the Googles and the Microsofts of the world and their recipients saying, hey, we don't really want this, especially for the bad actors. And so those responses made it more challenging. 2018, 2019, 2017, 2020, like in that period, Google and Microsoft were going through a lot of changes in terms of how they were going to handle different types of cold email, or probably more importantly, like nefarious email, that spoofing emails and what have you, that sort of all got lumped together. And so then it became about making sure you were authentic in terms of not only your messaging, but also making sure that the system's tied together and like you were who you said you were. Mm-hmm. And obviously with AI, now things have changed dramatically. And a lot of people have given up on email. On LinkedIn, where, oftentimes it's people repeating people who are repeating people. So you get sort of this, sort of this echo chamber type feel. Now people are giving up on email because it's way harder today than it even was 6 months ago, because now the way you have to orchestrate your technology and layer things together has gotten difficult. People are like, screw it, I'm giving up. So that's what's happening now, and that's my story on email. But the good news, I suppose, as I wind up this little intro segment, is it's doable. You can do it. My sales team is getting 200 held email meetings every single month, resulting in $75,000 in monthly recurring revenue every single month, just through email. So it's doable. You just got to be able to do it right, and hopefully I can help people get on that path.
Yeah, and let's talk about the doing it right. I'm in several CMO communities, and one of my favorite channels in one of those communities is the Rants channel. And a lot of what appears in the Rants channel is copy paste or screenshots of sales emails that people are receiving, and they're just horrible. Like they say nothing, it's always I hope this email finds you well. Yeah. Or they try and you talked about using humor. They try and use some like quirky humor or analogy. And most of it just comes across so cringy that it's like, there's no way I'd ever respond to this. And every blue moon, there's like, somebody will share a win of like, hey, I, wasn't necessarily interested in this solution, but this was a win. Who knows? Maybe that was from your team.
Could have been. Probably was. Yeah.
It is one of those things that more people are failing than winning at this. And so, while we are getting real tactical and in the weeds, I would love to hear, like, when you are talking to a client, onboarding a new person on your team, like, what are you communicating to them that is helping them to write the things that are landing the meetings and not the things that land up in Rants channels in various, executive communities?
All right. So I have some bad news here. You're going to end up in a Rants channel in some community. If you're sending enough, you're gonna, because there are, it's inevitable whether you're making, and by the way, you can expand this out of email, cold call, LinkedIn messaging, Google ads, Facebook ads. You're always at risk of somebody going, "Ugh, this is cringe." And beyond that, you have to be okay with that. You have to completely accept, because I talk to business owners on the other side of it. They go, "Oh, from my branding's perspective, I don't want anybody getting an email that they wouldn't want." It's like, well, then you can't do this kind of marketing. And by the way, you also can't cold call. You probably shouldn't do Facebook ads. You're sort of set with content and referrals, I suppose. So first thing is acceptance. Accept the fact that you are going to annoy someone if you do any kind of outbound marketing, email included, and especially, and you're probably going to end up in somebody's Rants channel. Now, can you avoid the more flagrant issues that end up in the Rants channel? Sure. And here are some easy tips. First, keep your emails under 90 words. A, you're more likely to get people to read it. And B, it's harder to say something really stupid or cringy in 90 words. You have less paper. There's less page. So that's tip number one. Tip number 2, nothing up front in your email other than hi, name, and the problem you're seeking to solve. No, hope it finds you well. No, it's been a long time. I don't want any of that. None of that. All of that is gone, has been gone. Sounds silly. Like, cut it out. Third, you want to use some weird punctuation. As much of it as you can. Ampersands, dashes, slashes. Unusual punctuation is a tip I hear underutilized that I love, because it draws the eye in a way, A, like generally reduces word count, but B, it draws the eye. Like, you just don't see a lot of ampersands anymore. Brandon, you see a lot of ampersands in life. Like, that's like, other than like book covers, it's kind of rare.
Yeah, it is. I know I am a person that overuses the ampersand, and I always feel weird about it because everyone spells out and now, and it's almost like an unofficial thing that people do.
That's right.
It's sort of like me and my side part. Like, they tell me it's out, but I still do it anyway.
That's so funny. We could do a whole other thing on, like, I am told routinely I have like horrible style, and like, no, like, I can't. I just, me personally, I'm just bad at it. And I don't know what's in or out. You know what's in though? Ampersands. That's what's in. And then lastly is, how do I keep it as casual as possible? I want real casual. I want to say, hi, Brandi, lowercase t, so it looks kind of like awkward. This is Jeff Winters at Abstrakt Marketing Group. We see a lot of people who are struggling to generate true sales pipeline. You know, like that. That's the problem you solve, is generating pipeline. And then last is zero jargon. You think you're not saying jargon, you're saying jargon. Every company has their own words they use that no one else uses. Don't use those words. So those are just a few tips that I would incorporate into my content to make it less cringy. It's not 100% fail-safe, but less cringy.
I would have to agree with all of those things. And it is interesting to me how, it's like the under 90 words. I see most people embracing that. Like, people holistically, marketers and salespeople have gotten that short is better, and that, you're trying to elicit a response and you can give them more of the meat, of it with the next thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the problem you solve, because this is one of those things that I think some people get it and some people don't. So, the majority of our listeners, I would say, are heads of marketing. And so they are definitely acutely aware of what is the problem that they are trying to solve, because that is the foundations of, all the marketing messaging. When I think about it related to the sales function, a lot of time, especially those that are doing the cold emails, the BDRs, the SDRs, the ones that are just trying to get a pulse, tend to be less close, not as close to the messaging around what is the real problem that's solving, that needs to be solved. And so for those that, are kind of thinking about it and they're like, yeah, I know our SDRs, like, what they're sending out is not, it's not really what we're getting at. Do you have any advice for those leaders on how you make sure that those people that are sending the emails really actually fully absorb what is the problem that's being solved?
I feel like you're going to get me in trouble here. So I kind of think the opposite. So
really?
I'm sorry. To all of my marketing friends who I love dearly, and all of those watching at home.
Hey, you said you wanted to be provocative. So
well, I think generally, I think often the salespeople have a way better idea of what the problem that is solved in the right way to say it than marketing people. Often, like our example, the problem our company solves is if you don't have enough sales pipeline sustainably, we solve that problem. Like, that's very easy to understand. Like, if you're a company, you don't have enough sales pipeline, we help you fill that sales pipeline forever. That's easy. That's very easy to understand. I think that not always, but often, marketing is coming up with a message that sounds really good in a room full of executives or a boardroom, or to like their peers, but doesn't truly resonate in a cold outbound email. And I think that the salespeople often do. Like, it's got to be short, it's got to be tight, and it's got to be very me to you. And I think that marketing, by the way, to their credit, look at me dancing. I'm really dancing around here. To their credit, because I get it on the website or on the social ads, I understand, but this is a totally different game. And so when I hear marketing's getting involved, am I like, oh, awesome, great, marketing's going to get involved? Like, often what I'm thinking is we're going to get told, or we're going to have to put in words that I don't think are right. Like this, like it should be dressed down, not dressed up. And I think sometimes marketing wants to dress it up a little bit.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing here is there is a key opportunity. And I mean, I wasn't intending to go down the alignment conversation, but
No, I know.
there needs to, I mean, we know there needs to be some serious alignment between marketing and sales. Like, that part is self-explanatory. But what I'm hearing is the enablement of those salespeople and messaging and things coming from marketing. Your desire is not messaging related to the outbound of what you're saying to drive customers, but more the air cover. Is that, like, I'm reading between the lines in terms of what you would want to see from the marketing team that you do feel is valuable?
I don't think that sales development or sales emails should ever touch marketing, ever. I think it should be completely separate. And so what I want to see from the marketing team is a great deal of support on all of the other amazing marketing functions that have to go on inside a business, but I don't want them anywhere near my sales team or my sales emails, personally.
Okay. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole just because you piqued my interest, but I'm gonna pull it back and get back on topic.
Oh, I feel like I'm gonna get destroyed. But that's
no. I always love to hear different perspectives. So I want to bring it back to email. So we talked about some of the key things in, kind of your 4 points, the weird punctuation. I love that. Hopefully people don't start overusing it, but there are definitely, ways that we can use sort of markup language and things to draw the attention. And then, of course, the keeping it casual. Let's talk about a bit about sequencing when it comes to email. I think that is the other place where a lot of revenue leaders struggle, because when I talk to, especially larger companies, there are usually playbooks and, the different technologies. They have the built out sequences where it's like, send this email, then here's the next one. And I'm all for the automation. Like, that's at the heart of what we do. But I feel like sometimes there is in sales emails, it's almost like they're a bit tone deaf. Like, I'm sending this next thing because this is the next thing in the sequence, not necessarily that it actually made sense for the scenario. And so when thinking about like cadence of communications and, how you tell people to consistently engage when they're not getting the meeting on the first email, I would love your thoughts there when it comes to sequencing.
So here was like the original 4-part email sequence, and it still goes on all the time. Here's what we do. Email 1. You want to have a meeting. Email 2. Did you see email 1? Email 3. As a reminder, here's what we do. Email 4. Why aren't you responding? In some way, though, that's like the theme of the forever email sequence. And that's what everyone gets some version of. And so you have to try to be pattern interruptive to a certain extent. But I have good news if you're sending bad emails. Most of the world's not seeing them. You're not getting into the inbox. Like, it doesn't matter. And even if you are, most of the world's not reading it. So, I guess the more interesting thing here to me, and the slightly less exciting from a content perspective, is we used to be in a day and age where content mattered so much, where what you wrote mattered so much. And it still matters some, but it matters in such it matters so much less than it used to. because what matters now is how is your technology set up to make sure you get an eyeball on it in the first place. That's what truly matters now. And to people that are listening where their email program is struggling, they know I'm right. Like they know that they went from getting an enormous amount of email responses a year ago, and now they're getting none. Or they're like, I talked to a friend the other day. So we sent out 150,000 emails. We got 0 meetings. I'm like, yeah, that is a thing that is happening. So, but back to your question really quick. What would I do sequencing wise? 5 emails, 40-day period, let them cool off, 90 days later. I know that it is best practice in today's day and age to email and then 3 days later call and then 4 days later email. Like that to me is very indicative of the fact that email alone often won't work because it's not being done very well. And you have to have calling in your process. And so I fully support that, especially if you have a smaller total addressable market. So if you have a smaller if you have 1,000 prospects you can sell to, you got to treat them all like gold. I'm not sending a ton of emails, getting unsubscribes, et cetera. So my cadence and my frequency often will depend on how many prospects I have in my market versus any other variable up front, because you just have to be so cautious if you have 1,000 prospects or 5,000 prospects. But in general, what's table stakes? 4 to 5 emails, 40-day period, sporadically sprinkling through calls, and trying to avoid the sequence I described earlier of, here's what we do. Do you want a meeting? Did you see my last email? As a reminder, here's what we do. Do you want a meeting? Why didn't you look at my last email?
Yeah, the why didn't you look at my last email are usually the ones that get the cringiest.
Yeah.
And so we talked a lot about, the in the weeds part. I want to elevate the discussion a bit to talk about the impact here. So we know just from your intro and what you said at the beginning of, what the real impact is. You get the meetings, that yields revenue. That part is pretty obvious. But let's talk about this, more holistically in terms of when you fail at this, what does that mean? What is the impact of that on the company? And beyond the obvious direct tie, meetings turn into opportunities, which turn into revenue. What are some of the key benefits when you get this right? And so I'd like to hear, both sides of, heads of revenue, heads of marketing, heads of sales, like when they are thinking about why they should spend a little time in the weeds, making sure their teams are getting this right. Like, what's your benefit and what's your cost of not getting it right?
So let's talk benefit first. So benefits, number one, it's always and forever been your lowest cost channel, period. Email is your lowest cost, or should be, your lowest cost acquisition channel of all the outbound channels. I'm not talking about I get it. People go, well, we get referrals. It costs us nothing. Fine. That's not what I mean. I'm talking of all your between digital or call or LinkedIn. Like this is going to be forever and always the lowest cost channel. And when it's right, that's awesome. The second thing is it ought to be a pretty high converting channel. So, aside from referrals and inbound, email ought to convert at the third highest closing rate of your general channel mix. And the reason for that's pretty obvious. I mean, in order to get a meeting through email, think about this. I mean, it's got to get to somebody's inbox. By some miracle, they have to read it. By an even greater miracle, they have to respond. And then they have to accept a calendar invite. Like, you got to jump over 4 bars to get an email meeting. So those ought to be, better than other channels where, for example, cold call, if I'm calling you and you're picking up and maybe you're in a meeting or you're distracted, like sometimes people take a meeting just to take a meeting as opposed to actually having to clear a couple bars. So the biggest benefit, number one, cost. Number two, close rate. Number three is predictability. If I know, like clockwork, I can get 1%, 0.5%, 1/3% of all prospects I email and schedule a meeting, you can set your clock to it. And those are 3 really big benefits if you get it right. Where it goes wrong. I feel like people like this better. Where it goes wrong can be pretty bad. So, for example, if you're sending emails, marketing emails from your corporate domain, and one of those emails gets a really nasty, or you have some pattern of people marking it as spam, then your corporate domain could get blacklisted. And the emails you send to your kids don't go through. I mean, that is the worst negative impact you can have from email prospecting. Less seriously, but still business impacting. And it all depends on how much you are leveraged to email as a channel. But Google changes its algorithm. If you're highly leveraged to email as a prospecting channel, it could go to 0 in a day, unless you know what you're doing and you're prepared for that. You're always tied to the whims of Google and Microsoft, and that's tough. I don't care what you're doing. If what you're doing, the success of what you're doing, in large part depends on the whim of another platform where you have zero visibility and zero control, that makes life pretty tricky. And so that's where it can go bad. And then third, for whatever reason, you're highly leveraged to email, and you have a new product, or you have a new offering, or you have a new something, and you think email is going to work the same way in product B as it did in product A. It never happens like that. So those are some examples.
I love it. And those are all like, we talk so much about, like, I almost feel like I should slip you a little tip on the spam and the changes, because this is something that we are preaching. And I could not have said it better myself. It's like, you have to spend some effort in making sure the technical setup for both marketing emails and your sales emails through your various, through your Sales Loft or your Marketo or whatever it is, however emails are going out, everything's got to be set up and monitored in a way that we have the highest chances of getting in the inboxes and not in spam. So to get at least the maximum number of eyeballs on it to have a chance to convert that message.
Can I tell people how to do that?
Yes, go right ahead.
All right. So here's what I'm doing if I'm you. If you're out there and you're going, my email stinks, we're going to give up on it. We gave up on it. It doesn't work. Here are some must-haves that the best in class folks who I'm fortunate enough to be able to talk to all the time are doing. The first is they're using multiple domains, never their corporate domain. So they're setting up multiple domains, and they're using a variety of different senders in those different domains. So like that is table stakes. Anybody who knows this game knows to do that for sales emails. The second thing is the days of having a pretty good list are over, of buying a list from a list source and putting it through a cleansing service and ripping it out of your sales platform. Would never do it. The best that I've seen are calling and verifying. Calling and verifying emails. So think of that extreme of I trust no one other than somebody who is a full-time employee to call and confirm. That's the gold standard. I want to start with everybody says, start with a good list. Nobody knows how to get a good list because you can't. You can't get a good list. There is no good list. The good list fallacy is over. I don't care how many platforms come out, how many cleansing services, don't work. We have some of the biggest companies in the world literally hire us to call and confirm data. Period. That is what they pay us for. They're not dumb. We know what we're doing. You have a gold standard, call, confirm the email addresses. Is it expensive? Sure. Is it worth it? Yes. And then last, they're sticking to a lot of the best practices, and also a bonus. If often the tool that you're using is part of the problem, and it is very hard to determine if the tool you're using is part of the problem, because it's like, you ever have like the internet modem router issue? Like people come to your house, you go, my internet doesn't work. They go, it's your modem. Then you bring out the modem people and they go, nah, it's your router. You go, wait a minute. Everybody says the router or the modem. So the provider using the send of the emails has no incentive to go, yeah, that one's on us. They have every incentive to go, it's your list, it's your content, it's your subject line. We're going to put you in touch with somebody who knows how to do that. And then you're like 6 months later, you're like, maybe it is the provider. And so I would be very, very cautious of not believing that the provider you're using isn't the issue. Like maybe it's the modem, maybe it's the router. Everybody's going to tell you a different thing. So like sometimes you got to change them both.
I would definitely agree. And then the last question that I have is around testing. So, you talked a lot about how what worked at one point, gets to a point where it no longer works. What worked for product A may not work for product B. What do you recommend, or what are you doing with your clients and teams around being able to test messaging tactics? Do you have an ongoing testing strategy? What are your thoughts around testing?
Yeah, I think the most important thing people get wrong around testing is using anything other than meetings as an output measure. Meetings are the only output metric that matters in email prospecting. Replies do not matter. Opens do not matter. They can matter, but they most often don't. I could send a horrible email and get a ton of replies. Doesn't mean they're good. And so what am I optimizing for? You have to optimize for meetings on the calendar. And then ultimately from there, close deals related to emails. Like that is to specific emails. So I think the number one thing people get wrong is, because everybody's so conditioned, what are the leading indicators? What are the leading indicators of meetings? It's replies. No, it's not. That's not right. It's opens. No, it's not. Those are both wrong. The leading indicator of success is often domain health. Like it's the health of your domain. How likely are you to get it to an inbox? That's the leading indicator I would use. In terms of testing, sure. We're always testing, reviewing results weekly in a great deal of depth, campaign by campaign, email by email, and domain by domain. How healthy are each of those domains?
I love that. And that is a really good, I do see, I think the one place I would disagree is that I do see some value in the other metrics. I do agree that at the end of the day, like the thing that leads to revenue, in this case, meetings, is the key indicator. But I would say, like, when it comes to testing, there are ways to test and validate if certain things help you get into the inbox, help you get to the opens. Reply, I could take it or leave it on that one, but at least understanding what helps get eyeballs on the content to then be able to say which content converts. I do think you have to look at both and not just, it's like, because if you don't get anybody to see it or open it, then there's zero chance of there being a meeting because they never knew it existed. So to me, you have to look at both. Why is your perspective only on the meeting?
So a couple points. That's I completely hear where you're coming from. And also, like, gotta distinguish here from like marketing nurture email from sales email. So I'm making that distinction. Here's why open rates don't matter to me. I am of the mind that open rate tracking is one of the many variables that will increase the rate at which you go into the spam folder. And so I've turned off open rate tracking on all sales emails. So maybe it is more indicative, but like Apple, there are certain tools that are like auto open emails. Like they open the email and they're giving you these false rates. So like the open rate to me, A, we don't use it. And B, when we did, I got false rates and I was doing things based on false rates because you'll get an auto open of an email through Microsoft and you're like, I thought I got a 40% open rate, but I didn't. It just auto opened the email and tracked it. So that's my gripe with open rates. Although I'm sure like directionally, if you get an 80% open rate on a Marketo email versus a 15% open rate over time, I'm sure you could trend that stuff out. Just for me, it's not helpful on sales development emails. Next, on replies, I think replies are very important in the context of telling a story. So what we're always trying to do is, what's the story? Is the story that we got a lot of replies and very few meetings? Okay, then we can change and tweak. Is the story that we got no replies and a couple meetings? Okay, then we can change and tweak to get more replies. My point is, I think a lot of people use replies as sort of a very important metric in their testing to say, okay, replies are great. This worked, as opposed to like, who cares? Doesn't matter. If the replies are bad, it doesn't work. So I guess maybe if I were to sharpen that statement a little bit, I'm still anti-open rate, but I hear your point. And maybe I would just be more cautious around replies and more on sentiment, like email reply sentiment, than I would be on just replies in general.
Okay, I can definitely support that. And it's more so Not that I would lean heavily into those metrics. It is more so I wouldn't ignore them. And so it's one of those things that I think, where I think certain metrics kind of get a bad rap is we talk about vanity metrics and things that are not truly leading indicators. And I agree completely. It's just they do also have a place in what we're looking at. So I'm very always hesitant. I very always to go all or nothing. I focus on the thing that is actually, the measure of actual results, while giving at least some incremental attention to some of the others to, as your point, see, is there a story that this data is telling us? So I wouldn't necessarily be reporting out to anyone on open rates, but looking at the trends of open rates. Okay, is this telling me something? Because it could be telling me that, my sales development emails went from 50% to 10%. That might tell me somebody changed something, and I got to figure out, is it the modem or the router? So like there is, there's some things that I feel we can learn by actually looking at that data, not necessarily just testing for content.
I think that's right. Well, first of all, thank you for latching on to that modem or the router analogy. I feel like that really worked. I
love a good analogy.
Oh, plus that's like, so if everybody knows that one, everybody's like, oh, the modem and the router. Yeah. I'm with you. Incremental attention. I agree with you. Incremental attention. That's what you should pay to any of those metrics. Agreed.
Well, awesome. I was going to say, I love when we can find a middle ground. But talking about our challenges is just the first step, and nothing changes if nothing changes. And so in traditional therapy, the therapist gives the client some homework. But here at Revenue Rehab, we like to flip that on its head and ask you to give us some homework. It very much is when you know better, you do better. And so I would say for those revenue leaders who recognize, like listening to you and your success, that they are not seeing that same success with their sales development emails, what would you suggest as the first step?
All right, so I'm gonna go even back a little further. So I'm gonna say my homework for revenue leaders is to make the cornerstone of your sales planning, the cornerstone of your budgeting, meetings. Like, take budgeting all the way back to meetings. Often what we see is sales teams that budget based on quota or forecast based on total quota times 85%. Total quota times, like, that is so common. It's like, okay, well, hey, in general, we're going to hit about 90% to quota. Our total quota is $1 million. Yeah, we're going to hit 900,000. That's what I'm going to forecast. And the last couple of years, we've seen that's not very true, because you could hit 400,000 or 500,000. What you can forecast using so much better is how many meetings, which channels, at what rates do those close in each channel, and then forecast that way. That is the best advice that I can give.
I love it. And, that connection that you are making between some of those higher level strategic thinking things that the revenue leaders have to focus on, making that connection to the very in the weeds tactical thing of tapping into email and other channels to yield that meeting, is a great way to have a little bit of a mindset shift around how we're doing that. So I love that as a takeaway.
Nice.
All right. I enjoyed our discussion, Jeff, but that is our time for today.
Okay.
But before we go, tell us how we can connect with you. And for those watching us live, they can see the Grow Show light behind you. So make sure to also tell us about your podcast.
So thanks for that. So the Grow Show is a podcast. Sort of got a radio show feel to it. Three of us sitting here. We have different segments. And there's a lot of really, really tactical nuggets on how to grow a business, from sales to leads to leadership. Check it out. We'd love to have you listen. Love to get your feedback. Next, a couple ways to get in touch with me. First, if you are a company and you're looking to jumpstart your pipeline, or anything I said resonated with you, you're like, you know what, I need to scratch that itch. Abstrakt, ABSTRAKT, MG.com, abstraktmg.com, or you can always find me on LinkedIn, Jeff Winters. I'm like one of a few. There are not that many of me.
Well, we will make sure to link to your LinkedIn, to Abstrakt, as well as to The Grow Show. So
Awesome.
wherever you are listening or watching this podcast, check the show notes so that you can connect with Jeff. Well, Jeff, I so appreciate you joining me, and thank you for our discussion. I always love when I can learn something from my guests as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad I was unique in my upfront answer, and I hope all I care about now, I care people listen and enjoy, but I really hope that it wins the bracket. That's very important to me.
Yes, I was gonna say we got quite a few months before we have another March Madness,
Okay.
but I think you got a good shot.
All right. Right on. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. I hope everyone has enjoyed my conversation with Jeff. I can't believe we're at the end. Until next time.
You've been listening to Revenue Rehab with your host, Brandi Starr. Your session is now over, but the learning has just begun. Join our mailing list and catch up on all our shows at revenuerehab.live. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Revenue Rehab. This concludes this week's session. We'll see you next week.